over on the Breaking Points YouTube channel, they are interviewing as many Republican and Democratic candidates as they can in the run-up to the 2024 US presidential election. And they interviewed Vivek Ramaswamy, and as part of their interview, they talk about climate change. So they had a great lively back and forth on the topic, and some points came up that I thought I'd like to comment on. So I'm going to play some clips here and make some remarks, and we'll see how this turns out.
And when you talk about people who are concerned with climate, you call them climatists, you call them climate cultists. You know, let's just put some of these news stories up on the screen here. You've got record high temperatures that are causing increasing death in Arizona. You've got workers who are dying from heat exhaustion. You've got people who are being choked by wildfire smoke from Canada. You've got an entire state of Florida that's basically uninsurable at this point. And American people are living this reality increasingly at this point, and an overwhelming majority of them, some 2/3, say, yeah, this is a concern for me. So do you have the sort of contempt in your heart for them that comes out in that language when you would describe them as climate cultists?
I have no contempt in my heart, Krystal. I have deep sympathy for people who are hungry for purpose and meaning and have relocated their desire for faith to the faith in climate instead.
Well, for starters, this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, is an amazing politician. He has the speaking skills, the way of presenting himself, the way of coming back quickly to questions. He is the kind of person that I think a lot of the media thought that Ron DeSantis was going to end up being. Now, actually, as we see Ron DeSantis starting to have a lot of mishaps and missteps with his campaign, Vivek Ramaswamy is picking up the slack, rising in the polls as DeSantis' campaign begins to falter. Now, as far as what Krystal had to say, yeah, there are some scary things happening. We've had a number of pretty bad stories related to bad weather this year and in previous years. Now, weather isn't climate, and even a series of bad weather events doesn't necessarily have to mean a bad climate trend. I like to stay optimistic. However, I have to say the data is starting to add up, and we're going to see more on the data and actual climate trends in upcoming clips. Now, Ramaswamy is expressing this kind of condescending attitude towards people who put their faith in climate. I don't care much for his attitude, being condescending towards people who are very concerned about something that is affecting their lives and affecting the world around them, but we're going to see more on his point of view coming up.
Krystal, in any other context, if the trust the science crowd were persuaded by lived experience of individuals of something that's actually a macro phenomenon, you would laugh them off the stage as a bunch of rubes who weren't data-driven.
Yeah, this guy is sharp. He came prepared. I'm sure he prepared that line well ahead of time for this interview. Or if not, he's even more impressive than I thought he was. But anyway, he's very good at coming across. He's kind of got that Donald Trump thing going where someone who has never been a professional politician is actually making one of the best politicians in this current election cycle. And to his point, yeah, that's absolutely right. We don't take anecdotes as science. We don't take stories as science. We don't go outside and say, it's hot, therefore there's climate change. But we're going to see that he is pulling some of the very same kinds of things in his arguments, and those kind of anecdotal arguments have been the basis for the crowd that says climate change isn't actually an important issue. And we're going to see him doing some of the very same things. So let's see now as Krystal starts bringing up some actual scientific long-term data.
I've got some data that I can put up on the screen. Go ahead and put the next, and then I want to hear from you. Go ahead and put the next pieces up on the screen. We've got some record lows in terms of Antarctic sea ice extent. We've got ocean temperatures that are smashing seasonal records. We had just the hottest June on record.
So there certainly are these actual trends that aren't looking good. Now, I like to be an optimist. I don't like to believe that the world's climate is changing for the worse and that we're going to start seeing serious problems from it. However, unfortunately, the data does consistently seem to be pointing that way.
Okay,
you're saying things I agree with.
Tell me what I'm getting wrong here and why this is not something that people should be concerned about and why they're in a cult if they are concerned about it.
Sure. So let me lay out some hard facts, both about my views and facts on the ground.
Okay. Sure.
Are global surface temperatures going up? Yes. Is that likely due to man-made causes? Yes. Is that an existential threat to humanity? There is no evidence to support that.
So we see how the climate debate is changing. Here, this guy who is very likely going to be part of the face of the Republican Party for years to come at his age with his skill sets, here he is accepting the climate data, accepting that things are trending in this direction, and accepting that there is a man-made cause behind it. Now, this is pretty new for the Republican Party, and if the way that Ramaswamy is talking, if this catches on, if this becomes kind of the future of Republican talking points, that's going to be quite a shift in the climate debate. Okay, now we're going to accept all this data, yet we're still going to argue about why we don't need to take this as a very serious issue.
To the contrary, 8 times as many people die of cold temperatures rather than warm ones.
So this is just putting a new face on the same old argument, the same old tactic of saying, well, it's cold, therefore global warming is a myth. Yes, more people die during cold periods of the year than hot periods of the year. That does not relate to rising ocean temperatures, which is leading to climate change, which is leading to desertification, which is leading to migrations of peoples and wars. And to conflate the two is, I think, intentionally dishonest on Ramaswamy's part.
The Earth today is more covered by green surface area than it was even a century ago because carbon dioxide is plant food. Plants actually grow in slightly warmer climates.
Now, this is a great point that he brings up, and yes, thankfully we are seeing environmental improvement in some areas over time, but that is a result of taking environmental issues seriously and working very hard to improve them. And as we see results to these efforts, I think that should tell us that these efforts are worth continuing. We should continue to take environmental issues seriously and work hard to improve them. Unfortunately, these improvements that he is mentioning are not entirely beneficial. A lot of this increase in greenery is simply an increase in crop production. As we see some parts of the world continue to desertify, other parts of the world are growing more crops than they used to. Now, growing a lot of rice and a lot of corn doesn't make up for losing Lake Chad, doesn't make up for losing the Aral Sea, doesn't make up for losing the Amazon rainforest. Just because we have more green biomass doesn't necessarily mean that the world is becoming a better place. We see increased crop production, which has its benefits, yet can also in itself be a strain on the environment as we use up more groundwater and apply chemicals that can hurt our water resources. And we also see parts of the world that continue to degrade and require taking environmental issues seriously.
The climate disaster-related death rate is down by 98% over the last century, directly attributable to more abundant and plentiful access and use of fossil fuels.
Now, he makes a great point here that so many things have gotten better over the past 100 or 200 years. We're seeing great increases in human well-being due to technology. People are living longer, suffering less. There's a lot to be thankful for, and hopefully we see these trends continue. But to just attribute it all to the use of fossil fuels seems short-sighted or maybe even dishonest on the part of Ramaswamy here. As we find energy sources that are cleaner, safer, and even more efficient, that adds to the story of human progress that we can all be thankful for. And someone like Ramaswamy, I think, should want to see this progress in energy continue.
So I want to be really clear about my view. This is not a, does climate change exist or not? It's the wrong framing of the question. The question is, what impacts human prosperity, human flourishing in a world in which there are net positive and net negative effects of climate, but also net positive and net negative effects of the use of fossil fuels?
Now, that's a good way of looking at things. I agree with that way of looking at things. How do we better the human condition? Now, I believe that the betterment of the human condition is connected very much to the betterment of the environment within which we live. And to separate the two is a false dichotomy. Having more water, more native vegetation, having more animal biodiversity, these things increase the robustness of life on Earth, making Earth more sustainable, more inhabitable, more able to support pleasant human existence. And having cheaper, cleaner energy does the same, while lessening any negative impacts that our desire for a pleasant and abundant life might have on our environment.
I also find it to be a mystery, and it's a mystery maybe you can help me solve, Krystal. Why is it that many of the people who are the staunchest opponents to carbon emissions are also among the staunchest opponents to hydroelectric energy or to nuclear energy? I think that suggests there's something else going on.
There's
Why
been
the
quite a
different
shift.
standards for China?
Let me
I think
just
that there's
say-
something else going on here. That's my point about there's a religious conviction that goes beyond a commitment to the facts.
Let me just say that even Greta Thunberg, who comes in for a lot of criticism as a quote-unquote climate cultist, is now in favor of nuclear energy. I agree with you on nuclear that should be more of a push, by the way.
If you want to stick to Greta, I actually respect Greta for one thing. She's honest. She says it's not just about the climate. It's about social justice. It's about climate justice. It's about equity. So these are things that at least she is actually an honest statement of what the movement stands for.
If you're living in a poor neighborhood in this country, you're more likely to be affected by the toxic plants and toxic chemical
Disagree.
plants. And,
you're more likely to be
dirty
affected by
water.
restraints on fossil fuels is actually what you're likely to be affected by.
I wonder
People
if
are
you
dying
have
because
followed-
of lack of access to fossil fuels.
Imagine a world wherein the only way to make things better is to burn more fossil fuels. That seems to be the world that Vivek Ramaswamy lives in, and that is a make-believe world. The fact is, there's just people who see things differently. There's people who say, you know what, maybe we can do things better. Maybe we don't need fossil fuels. Maybe we can do things better than even hydropower. There's a big cost to hydroelectricity as we dam up rivers, we destroy wetlands, we destroy agricultural lands. There's a cost and a benefit, as Ramaswamy himself says, to all of these things. And some people simply have a different analysis than he does. That doesn't mean that they're in a climate cult or that they're somehow anti-human progress. Maybe it's he himself who is anti-human progress with his fixation on fossil fuels. A lot of these climate activists are saying we can improve the human condition and improve our environment. We can have longer, more abundant lives without destroying our wetlands, without decreasing biodiversity, without decreasing the abundance of clean water.
I wonder if you've followed though what's happening because you're a capitalist, you're a successful business guy, so you certainly understand the way that markets work. You look at Florida, you look at Louisiana, you look at Texas, Colorado, California. These are all places that insurance companies, home insurance companies are pulling out of because the risk of catastrophic weather, extreme weather is so great now that it doesn't make sense for them to insure in these marketplaces. Florida, you talk about the human impact. Florida is becoming virtually uninsurable because of the lack of home insurance companies that are willing to operate in this state. So I don't know how you can look at the situation right now and say that, there aren't already extreme costs being imposed on people, not to mention workers who are falling out from heat exhaustion, et cetera.
So, Krystal, I don't take my facts on the climate change debate from what the home insurance market is actually doing. In many ways, that's distorted by the same climate cult manifest through the ESG movement because the shareholders of these companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, are effectively requiring them to behave that way. Why are they doing it? It's because CalPERS, State of New York, and large pension funds have said they won't invest with the large asset managers unless they're signatories of the Climate Action 100+ network.
But
That's
let me say on
$68
that
trillion.
too.
So I've written books about this. We can go into as much depth as you want.
I know you have, but you do know. I mean, on the ESG thing, I have my own critique of ESG. That is greenwashing. That none of these companies care about the environment or climate or whatever. There are studies that show that the funds and the companies that claim ESG and they're all about it, et cetera, they're actually dirtier than the other companies. So in a sense, you've won on that front. But Saagar has a question for you. I don't want to monopolize all the time, and I know that you have a limited amount of time for us as well.
Well, once again, this guy's good. He knows how to talk. He knows how to prepare for these kinds of debates, these kinds of interviews, and he is sure to be a rising star in the Republican Party. Unfortunately, he's just bringing along so many of the old, tired talking points, this idea that there's only one very limited way forward and that anything else is some kind of an anti-American plot. I don't agree with that. I think the world's a bigger place than that, and I think that the possibilities that we have are much greater than that. Now, if we look at biblical teachings, there's no doubt that there is room for debate on whether even having a lot of possessions is the right way to go. In the climate debate, both sides usually claim to want to have economic growth, to want to have an increase in the amount of goods and infrastructure that are available. They just talk about using this kind of energy or that kind of energy. If we go to the Bible, if we go to the New Testament, the teachings of Jesus, we'll see that he has a completely different way, which is to say, hey, maybe everyone should just become more simple. Maybe everyone should have less and find happiness in other things. Find happiness in service. Find happiness in faith, in trust, in love. But of course, those teachings don't even come into the climate debate. And anytime someone does actually say, hey, maybe we should have less things, that person is immediately branded a radical and becomes the subject of conspiracy theories. So in reality, our whole debate is quite limited. It's all based on how can we have more stuff? Can we have more stuff doing things this way? Or can we have more stuff doing things in a way that's maybe a little more environmentally conscious? Now, if we were to bring in Jesus's way and make all of these things measure up to his standard, I think we'd find some solutions that would be very difficult to present or find acceptance in today's political climate, yet would be real solutions and really move humanity and the whole natural world in the way that things should actually be. Well, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. Please leave some comments. Tell me what you think about all this, and I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.